Progressive groups in Texas are suing to block a last-minute order from Governor Greg Abbott that reduced the number of ballot drop-off locations within the state. Last week, voter advocacy and civil rights groups filed a second federal lawsuit to overturn the restriction. The October 1st order limits the number of drop-off locations for people casting absentee ballots to 1 per county, regardless of population. Governor Abbott said the change would strengthen voting safety in Texas. During the pandemic, a record number of Texas voters have requested mail-in ballots. Early voting starts October 13th. For more, let's bring in Politico Texas correspondent Renuka Rayasam. Renuka, thanks very much for joining us. She covers Texas politics, policy, and healthcare. Apologies, we're having a little bit of prompter trouble here, but let me ask you about what or whom prompted Governor Abbott to issue this order, and what is the latest on multiple lawsuits challenging it?
Sure. Abbott hasn't said much about why he issued the order other than to say that he's concerned about voter fraud and election monitoring. So these drop-off ballot locations need to be monitored. And so he said that in order to make sure that that monitoring can take place, he's limited the number that can be in every county, so 1 per county. That means that Harris County, with its millions of residents, and they've already opened up several drop-off locations. It can only have 1 in the county, and Travis County, which contains Austin, they've also opened up several drop-off locations for these ballots, and now they can only be limited to 1.
Well, which parts of the state stand to be most impacted by this order?
Well, yeah, so if you think about Texas, I think most of the population's within sort of a triangle: Dallas, Houston, Austin, and then San Antonio. And those are just really populous, fast-growing counties, and they're big, a lot of traffic, and so those are the counties that are really going to be most affected, where people live. They have to drive a lot, long distances, to get to that 1 drop-off location. Obviously, there's a lot of rural parts of the state, west and in the Panhandle. In those counties, small counties, are not going to be all that affected because they probably only had 1 location anyway. But if you think about Harris County, which includes Houston, for example, one of the people suing is an older man who is eligible for mail-in voting, who said instead of driving 30 minutes to drop off his ballot, he's going to have to drive 90 minutes each way to drop off a ballot now.
Wow. And to be clear, is there any evidence, Renuka, that having more drop-off sites would enable voter fraud?
No, I mean, voter fraud is something that Republicans around the country have been talking about for a long time. Here in Texas, it's been a huge topic for several years. And if you look at cases that get prosecuted, I mean, they're not at all what you would think of these ballot harvesting operations or people committing wide-scale fraud. I mean, the cases that Texas has brought against voter fraud are often cases where people thought they were eligible to vote and weren't necessarily, but those ballots were caught, and it was more just a case of one-off here and there, people who thought they were eligible who weren't, not necessarily some sort of grand-scale fraud that some have alleged.
Well, Texas, of course, has a whopping 38 electoral votes up for grabs. The latest CBS News battleground tracker puts the president ahead there by a single point. The Washington Post says polling in Texas has traditionally underestimated Democratic candidates. What can you tell us about the changing electorate and the potential for Texas to go blue?
Well, so there's a meme in Texas about, Texas Democrats turning the state blue. I mean, this is still a very conservative state.
Right.
But yes, the state has changed a lot. There huge growth. I think the state added about 4 million residents in the past 10 years. A majority of those are Hispanic residents. The population of whites, or Anglos, as they say in Texas, has decreased over the past 10 years. So much of that growth has been in the suburbs that we're talking about in this race around the country. So the suburbs around Dallas County, around Houston, around Austin. And Trump is not popular in those areas. And and he's generally an unpopular president by Republican standards in Texas. I mean, you think about George W. Bush, who was obviously Texas governor, who was super popular here, and even Mitt Romney and John McCain are polling better as candidates than Trump is as president in Texas. And so Biden sees an opportunity here. He's just started investing a lot of money. The election is less than a month away, so there will be a big question about whether it's too late. But a lot of Texas Democrats I've spoken with said if Biden can appeal to the growing Hispanic vote in the state, these are new voters, people who may have never voted before, then he has a chance to flip the state. But I still see it as a long shot. When in previous elections, when Democratic turnout has increased, so has Republican turnout. Democrats have overshot in some races. And even in 2018, they managed to flip state House seats, state Senate seats, a few congressional seats. But if you look at the statewide offices in 2018, the Governor Abbott was a Republican, was reelected. The Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General, all Republicans reelected. And of course, Beto got close to beating Ted Cruz, but Ted Cruz still won.
In our final minutes here, let's talk about the Senate. Three-term Republican incumbent Senator John Cornyn is being challenged by Democrat MJ Hagar. Now, Hagar's campaign announced a huge fundraising boost of more than $13 million in just 3 months in the third quarter. What was behind that, and where does that race stand?
So that race, I looked at the polling this morning, and I think the average is that Cornyn's about 8 points ahead. MJ Hagar does not have, despite raising $13.5 million in the third quarter, doesn't have the kind of momentum that Beto had. But for comparison, I think Beto raised something like $38 million in the third quarter of 2018. And so the money in that race was just enormous. But she is closing the gap. That she is an Air Force veteran, and she ran in a congressional seat in 2018 and nearly won. This is a congressional seat that included Fort Hood. And this race is becoming far more competitive. John Cornyn is different than Ted Cruz, which is also making this race a bit different. Ted Cruz is generally less popular, and John Cornyn's been popular, but he's also associated with the president. And you see him now trying to moderate his message a little bit and trying to appeal to some of those Democratic and crossover moderate voters. But MJ Hagar is definitely closing the lead. She is definitely giving him a run for his money in the fundraising arena. And she's going to try to close that gap, and she's got the money to do it in these final weeks.
Just one of the many fascinating storylines we're going to be watching in the weeks ahead. All right, Renuka Rayasam. Renuka, thank you so much.
Thank you.